She gave her last $5,000 to a desperate child, never imagining how he would return. The fluorescent sign above Ilara's Eats flickered, each stutter a weak heartbeat against the encroaching blizzard. Inside, Ilara wiped down the worn linoleum counter, the movement a familiar, hollow ritual. The diner was empty save for a few stubborn regulars who nursed their coffees, their faces grim etchings against the steamy windows. Outside, the wind howled a song of pure isolation, piling snow against the glass like a creditor come to collect. And collect they would. On the small desk in her back office, a stack of red-stamped envelopes sat like a monument to her failure. The final notice from Mr. Sterling, the building's owner, was on top, its cruel, blocky letters promising eviction by the end of the week. Ilara felt the cold not just in the draft that snaked under the door, but in the marrow of her bones. It had been 2 years since her husband, James, had passed, leaving her with this diner, his dream, and a mountain of debt she could never seem to summit. She was 46, a widow of color in a town that had grown colder than its winters, and she was utterly, profoundly alone. Her only hope was a small, tightly bound roll of cash hidden in a Folgers can in her pantry. $5,000, scraped together over a year of skipped meals and mended clothes. It was just enough to appease Sterling, to buy another month, another sliver of time to pray for a miracle. The bell above the door chimed, a sharp, incongruous sound in the heavy silence. A boy stood there, no older than 12, dusted in snow, his breath coming in white plumes. He was small for his age, with wide, terrified eyes that darted around the diner before landing on her. He wore a thin jacket, wholly inadequate for the storm, and his hands were bare, chapped red from the cold. Old Man Hemlock, nursing his coffee in the corner booth, grunted. "Lock the door, Ilara. No good comes walking in this late, in this weather." The boy ignored him, his focus a laser on Ilara. He walked directly to the counter, his worn sneakers silent on the checkered floor. He clutched the strap of a ragged backpack. "Ma'am?" His voice was a fragile tremor. I need help." Ilara's heart, already a bruised and weary thing, gave a painful lurch. She saw in his face not malice, but a desperation that mirrored her own. It was the look of someone standing on the absolute precipice of ruin. Ilara leaned forward, her voice soft, trying to gentle the fear from his eyes. "What is it, son? What kind of help?" The boy swallowed hard, his gaze dropping to the counter before rising again, filled with a terrible adult resolve. "I need money," he said, the words rushing out. "It's my mom. She's sick, real sick. The doctors, they said she needs an operation right away. They said if we can't pay a deposit, they can't do it." He paused, his chest heaving. "It's $5,000. The number hung in the air. A stunning, impossible sum. A cruel joke. It was the exact amount she had hidden in the coffee can. Hemlock scoffed from his booth. 5,000? Kid, you'd have better luck asking the moon for a loan. Go on. Get out of here." But Ilara didn't look away from the boy's face. She saw the raw terror there, the frantic love for his mother that eclipsed everything else. She knew that feeling. She had felt it sitting by James's bedside, watching the light fade from his eyes, her own world dimming with it. She had been helpless then, a prisoner of fate and finance. Now, looking at this child, she was being asked to choose. Her survival or his mother's. The logical part of her brain screamed. That money was her only lifeline. It was the barrier between her and the street, the difference between a home and homelessness. Giving it away was suicide. It was madness. But then she looked at his hands, clenched into small, desperate fists on her counter. She saw James's hands, strong and capable, now still. She saw a lifetime of what-ifs. What if someone had been there for them? What if a single act of grace had changed their story? The whispers of the town, the judgment in Hemlock's eyes, the stark reality of Sterling's eviction notice. It all faded into a dull hum. All that mattered was the frightened child in front of her and the choice she had to make. It wasn't a choice between her diner and a stranger's life. It was a choice about who she was. Was she the woman who would lock her door against the storm, hoarding her last few crumbs? Or was she the woman James had loved? The woman who believed kindness was a currency more valuable than cash. Her quiet desperation met his, and in that shared space of fear, a profound clarity settled over her. She would not let another family be shattered if she could stop it. "Wait here," she whispered, her voice thick. She walked into the back, her legs feeling strangely light. She didn't hesitate. She retrieved the Folgers can, her hands steady as she unrolled the wad of cash. Each bill represented a small sacrifice, a moment of hunger, a worry-filled night. It was the sum of her fears. She walked back out and placed the money on the counter in front of the boy. The whole world seemed to hold its breath. The boy stared at the cash, then at her, his eyes filling with a disbelief so pure it was heartbreaking. "All of it?" he breathed. Alara simply nodded, pushing the stack toward him. "Go," she said softly. "Go save your mom." The boy, whose name she would learn was Marcus, was speechless. He reached out a trembling hand and touched the money, as if to confirm it was real. Tears streamed down his face, silent and hot. I don't understand," he stammered, looking up at her, his expression a mixture of awe and confusion. "You don't even know me," Alara managed a small, sad smile. "I know what it's like to be scared," she said. "And I know what it's like to love someone more than yourself." Marcus carefully gathered the bills, his movements reverent. "I'll pay you back," he said, his voice ringing with a conviction that belied his age. "I swear on my mother's life, I will pay you back. Every single cent." He then shrugged off his backpack and pulled out a small object. It was a bird, carved from a single piece of dark wood, its wings half spread as if caught in mid-flight. The craftsmanship was simple but beautiful, filled with a patient love. "It's not much," he said, his cheeks flushing. "I made it. It's the only thing I have that's worth anything. Please take it." As collateral, he pushed the wooden sparrow across the counter. Alara picked it up. It was smooth and warm in her palm, a small, solid weight of hope. She closed her fingers around it. "I'll keep it safe for you," she promised. He gave her one last, grateful look that seared itself into her memory, then turned and ran out into the storm, the bell above the door heralding his departure into the white, swirling chaos. The diner was quiet again, but the silence was different now. It was heavier. It was the silence of the void she had just created for herself. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world of pristine, punishing white. The calm was deceptive. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bell chimed again. It was Mr. Sterling. He was a small, neat man whose pinched face always seemed to be soured by the world's failings. He didn't bother with pleasantries. "Alara," he said, his voice as crisp as the foreclosure notice he held in his hand. "The grace period is over. The 5,000. Do you have it?" Alara stood behind the counter, her hands empty. The wooden bird was in her apron pocket, its small weight a poor substitute for the roll of cash that was no longer there. "No, Mr. Sterling," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't." A flicker of cruel satisfaction crossed his face. "I see. I had a feeling you wouldn't be able to manage it." He stepped outside and, with 3 sharp thrusts of a pushpin, affixed the bright orange foreclosure notice to the center of her glass door. It was a public branding. "The auction is in 4 weeks, he announced to the empty street. "I suggest you start packing." He got back in his warm car and drove away, leaving Alara to stare at the paper that officially declared her a failure. The few customers who came in that day saw the notice, saw the defeated look in her eyes, and whispered. They had seen her give the money to the boy. "Foolish," she heard one woman mutter. "Throwing good money after bad." On a boy like that, the judgment was a physical blow, colder than any winter wind. Her act of compassion had been recast as an act of idiocy. The diner, once her sanctuary, now felt like a tomb. Weeks bled into one another, each day quieter and colder than the last. The foreclosure notice on the door scared away any remaining customers. Alara spent her days in the deepening gloom, sorting through James's old things, packing her life into cardboard boxes. Her savings were gone. Her credit was shot. She had been eating canned soup for a week. The hope she had felt when Marcus left had curdled into a deep, abiding despair. The wooden bird was her only companion. She would take it out of her pocket and turn it over and over in her hands, the smooth wood a tangible link to the choice she had made. She was polishing it with the hem of her shirt one afternoon when the mail slot clattered. It was a single, thin envelope, addressed to the kind woman at the diner. Her hands shook as she tore it open. The handwriting was a child's, neat and careful. "Dear ma'am," it began. "I don't know your name, but I will never forget your face. I wanted to tell you the surgery worked. My mom is going to be okay. She's weak, but she's awake, and she smiled at me yesterday. The doctors said you saved her life." Alara sank into a booth, pressing a hand to her mouth to stifle a sob of relief. The letter continued. "My mom, her name is Sarah, used to clean buildings before she got sick. She told me she used to clean this very diner a long, long time ago for the first owner. She always said he was a good man who treated everyone with respect. She said this place had a good soul. When I met you, I knew what she meant. I'm going to work hard. I'm going to get an education and build things that help people. And I'm going to come back and repay you. Promise. Your friend, Marcus." The letter didn't contain money. It didn't solve her problems. But as Alara held the paper, she felt a flicker of warmth spread through her chest. Her act hadn't vanished into the void. It had landed. It had saved a life. It had honored a legacy. It was enough. The day of the auction was stark and gray, the sky a lid of flat, unforgiving metal. A small crowd had gathered outside the diner. Mr. Sterling looking smug, a slick developer in an expensive coat who planned to tear the place down for a parking lot, and a handful of curious townspeople, there to witness the final nail being hammered into Alara's coffin. Alara stood to the side, a ghost at her own funeral. She had packed the last box that morning. The diner was a hollow shell, scrubbed clean, waiting for its new, uncaring owner. She had accepted it. She had made her choice, and this was the cost. She clutched the wooden bird in her pocket, its familiar shape a small anchor in a sea of loss. She had lost her husband's dream, her home, her place in the world, but she had kept her soul. It would have to be enough. The auctioneer cleared his throat, ready to begin the proceedings. "We are here today for the sale of the property at 114 Main Street," he began. Mr. Sterling smirked, ready for his victory. Just then, a low hum grew into a purr, and a fleet of four sleek, black sedans turned onto Main Street, their tinted windows reflecting the gray sky. They moved with a silent, confident authority that brought the entire street to a halt. They pulled up directly in front of the diner. The back door of the lead car opened, and a young man stepped out. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a perfectly tailored suit, his face calm and composed. He looked around, his eyes scanning the crowd before they landed on Alara. His expression softened instantly. It took her a moment, a dizzying, heart-stopping moment, to realize who it was. It was Marcus. Years had passed, but the eyes were the same. Only now, they held not fear, but an unshakable power. He strode toward her, his expensive leather shoes making no sound on the pavement, ignoring the auctioneer, the developer, and the gaping Mr. Sterling completely. "Alara," he said, his voice now a deep, steady baritone. He had learned her name. "I told you I'd be back." The auctioneer, flustered, tried to regain control. "Sir, we're in the middle of a public auction." Marcus didn't even look at him. He simply raised a hand, and another man, equally well-dressed, stepped forward with a briefcase. Marcus turned to the auctioneer. "What's the starting bid?" he asked calmly. The man stammered, $50,000. Without blinking, Marcus said, 500,000. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The developer's jaw dropped. Mr. Sterling's face went from smug to slack-jawed. 500,000? The auctioneer squeaked. Cash. Marcus's associate opened the briefcase, revealing neat stacks of $100 bills. The developer, pale and defeated, shook his head and stepped back. No one else dared to speak. "Sold," the auctioneer whispered. "To the gentleman in the suit." Marcus's team handled the paperwork with swift, silent efficiency. Within minutes, the deed was signed. Marcus took the document, walked directly past a sputtering Mr. Sterling, and placed it gently in Alara's hands. "This is yours," he said. "It was always yours." Alara stared at the paper, her name printed in fresh ink, and then back at him, tears blurring her vision. "Marcus, how?" He smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile. "That $5,000. It did more than save my mom. It gave her time to heal, and it gave me the peace of mind to focus on my studies. I finished high school at the top of my class, got a full scholarship to Stanford. I started a software company in my dorm room. We build systems that help communities. Ethical tech. It's called Sparrow Innovations." He glanced at her apron pocket, where her hand was still clutching the wooden bird. "You taught me that the best investment you can ever make is in people. We call it reciprocal investment. You gave when you had nothing. It's our honor to give back now that we have everything." As he spoke, the doors to the other cars opened. A team of people, architects, designers, contractors, began to emerge, followed by a truck from a restaurant supply company, laden with gleaming new stainless steel ovens, refrigerators, and furniture. "We're not just saving the diner, Alara," Marcus said. "We're rebuilding it. And we've also taken care of Mr. Sterling's parent company. He won't be bothering you, or anyone else in this town, ever again." The crowd of townspeople stood in stunned silence, their earlier judgment turning to ash in their mouths. Marcus turned to face them, his voice ringing with authority. "This woman," he said, placing a hand on Alara's shoulder, "is a hero. Years ago, when she was on the brink of losing everything, she gave her last dollar to save a life she didn't know. My mother's life. She did it while some of you whispered and judged. She showed a compassion that this town had forgotten." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Let her be a lesson to all of you. True wealth isn't what you hoard. It's what you give away." From the lead car, another figure emerged. A woman, elegant and healthy, with a warm, radiant smile. She walked straight to Alara and enveloped her in a fierce hug. "I'm Sarah," she whispered. "My son has told me everything. Thank you. Thank you for giving me back my life, and for showing my boy what a good heart looks like." Alara, weeping openly now, hugged her back. The cold isolation that had surrounded her for years finally broke, washed away in a flood of cathartic tears. Her quiet diner was suddenly the center of the universe. Marcus, Sarah, and their team of brilliant young professionals surrounded her, not as saviors, but as family. They ushered her inside, past the new equipment being carried in, and sat her down at one of her old, wobbly tables. For the first time in years, Alara was not alone. She was the matriarch of a new, powerful, and loving family, founded on a single act of desperate kindness. 1 year later, the sign above the diner no longer flickered. It glowed with a warm, steady light, spelling out, "The Sparrow's Nest." The interior was completely transformed. New booths, warm lighting, a state-of-the-art kitchen, but it retained its soul. It was always full, a vibrant hub where no one was ever turned away for lack of funds. Alara ran it not as a business, but as a sanctuary. Marcus and his mother were there every Sunday. His team members were regulars, their laughter filling the space that had once been saturated with silence and despair. The town had changed, too, humbled and inspired by her story. People were a little kinder to each other, a little quicker to help. On the counter, next to the high-tech register Marcus had installed, sat a small glass case. Inside, perched on a velvet stand, was the little wooden sparrow. Customers would often ask about it, and Alara would tell them the story. She would look at the bird, its wings forever poised for flight, and feel a profound sense of peace. It was a constant reminder that the most powerful forces in the world are not wealth or influence, but faith and love. It was proof that one small, selfless act, sent out into the world like a prayer, can be returned to you 1,000-fold, bearing the impossible gifts of hope, family, and redemption.